All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Free Markets Green Earth. This is episode number 56. I'm Nicky P here, as always, with Ben the Liberty Hippie. How are you doing there, Ben?
I'm good. I'm alive. It's hot as all get out. But
It's hot, but you're wearing a hat.
I'm wearing a hat because yes, I'm wearing a hat.
Vanity trumps your sense of,
No, I'm
self-preservation.
it's not so much for me. It's for everybody else. My hair is just like, I haven't taken a shower after being outside all day, and probably should have, but I didn't have time. And
Ben,
it is what it is.
nothing is going to take the memory of your dreadlock skullet away from us. Okay, we remember. You can put all the hats on you want to.
No.
So we have a guest here. I'm really excited to have this guy on. I've been following his Twitter for a while, and he seems like a pretty solid dude. And just his name alone really tweaks me out because it's just such a slap in the face to so many people, and I love that. This is our guest today, Mr. Reed Coverdale, the Naturalist Capitalist. And all of our people that may be of the left are sitting there going, "Oh, that's not possible. What is this blasphemy? How does he not implode?" So how are you doing there, Reed?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
why don't you tell us the how that genesis comes about? Why are you not exploding right now or turning into like a just like a question mark of nature?
Well, I should explain the name first and what it means. I'm not a naturalist by trade. It's more the religious, scientific meaning of the word. You know, I really look for beauty in nature. I'm not a religious person. I think spiritual things could exist, but I think I really find solace in the mountains and being outside. And I really care a lot about the environment and nature. But I'm also, this is going to trigger a lot of people, I'm also economically literate, and I want solutions that will more naturally present themselves. And so I believe in capitalism, and that's actually tied into the name Naturalist Capitalist, because I think if you have a capitalistic economy, then it is more natural. People will act more, more sane and more cordial and more, everything's just going to work better. We're all naturally capitalists. If we try to force communism or socialism or basically any other type of economic system on people, those capitalistic tendencies that we all have, those naturalistic survival of the fittest tendencies are still going to exist. It doesn't matter what type of system you push on people. So the least exploitable and most honest way to get everyone to cooperate is to make them compete against each other and try to come up with the best products, the best services. And I think everyone is better off that way than any other system that has been put forward so far.
Well, I'm confused. You didn't say we need to pave over everything green and throw shopping malls everywhere.
Yeah, it is tough. But if you look in nature, that's how nature works, right? Where it's not just humans that are that way. Everything is trying to better itself. The trees are trying to outgrow each other. The smaller underbrush is trying to grow up through the forest. It's just a natural way things work. So instead of pretending that we're all benevolent, perfect beings that are going to just help each other out, we got to be honest. You got to have skin in the game to get people to care and to get them to be productive. And that kind of sucks. I mean, it would be nice if we were all just, we could all live communally and not care about bettering ourselves more than each other. But I'm clear-eyed and realistic about how people are, I guess, just like the rest of nature is.
That was, it's funny. That's one thing that like I always found peculiar about like the whole environmentalism and all of that, like when you look at nature and you look at the plants, you look at the animals, when you look at the happenings of nature, it's a process. And even just like the stream, freezing and cracking and eroding like the mountain away, like that all happens. And it happens because the stream wants it to, because the stream needs to go that way because it's the easiest path. And like, it's not all helping out necessarily. And maybe it is in some sort of, weird way that this is what's meant to be, but that you can say that to the same as people, we're all helping each other in the way that it's meant to be, whatever that means. But yeah, it's not, this big kumbaya, let's all sit around and play the drums,
Well,
it's fun, but
I mean,
Yeah.
and this is a big thing that they've covered. I recently just finished up Bjorn Lomborg's False Alarm, and I won't say it necessarily got better. It was a teeth gritting thing to get through, like where he constantly just agrees with everything that we say about the environment for the most part, but then somehow contradicts himself and says, "Oh, but it's all
you have to have a state."
but we really need to care about this." Like, it's like you can tell me there's a problem, but then you tell me all the mechanisms by which that problem would destroy the earth are not real. So then I have to ask, by what mechanism do I need to fear this thing? Neither here nor there. One of the things that he gets into and Schellenberger got into in Apocalypse Never is this anti-human thing. And you and me, I'm excited to hear people talking about it now, because you and me did an episode about a year ago specifically on the philosophy that these people carry around. Everything is anti-human. They hate humanity. They look at us as basically nature is everything that's not us and not something that we produce. When as Reed just said, we're following all of the same instincts that a wolf does, the instincts that the river or the trees do. They're trying to reach their full potential. Now, humans' potential, because of how complex a being we are, maybe is wildly outsized compared to the rest of nature. But to look at us as something fundamentally not nature is also its own problem.
It's funny, like you look at that, right? And like, so either humanity evolved to the point that it did, where it had this brain and is able to capitalize on things that the cricket is not able to, or some other being placed us in this role, and so you no matter how you cut it, like it's there. I don't know. Sorry.
What I think is weird is, a lot of religious people tend to be capitalistic or libertarian or, conservative, where a lot of people who don't believe in a higher power and in all other areas of their lives are very naturalistic. A lot more of them are communists or socialists or left-leaning. And that seems really backward to me, because they hate everything about the church dictating how you should live, what you're supposed to drink, all these things. But then when it comes to personal life or finances, then, they're exactly the same as the church to you. You need to give us 10%. You need to, It's like, wait, what's with that disconnect there? I don't get it both ways, like I understand some Christians think they're supposed to be, the ideas of hard work and being fruitful and multiplying, maybe they could tie that into capitalism or whatever, but I don't understand the atheistic left who really it doesn't make any sense. It's just completely illogical to me.
Yeah, it seems to kind of latch on to the same ideas that religion latch onto, but don't paint it as religion. It's almost like
I guess
politics has become a religion.
As the resident lefty, which I will tout myself as being, even though most lefties would probably call me a right-wing Nazi, I still think of myself as a leftist, because I still have all those social justice causes in my wheelhouse. I just think that all of the mechanisms that they're trying to create the world they want by are going to inevitably not do that. They're going to cause blowback. They're going to cause backlash. They're going to just plain old not work. So you know, it is weird how some of the ideology. And I guess it's because, you know, here as a libertarians that we have an ideology, and it's part of our ideology is just being as consistent as we can possibly be. Whereas look at the right wing conservative movement or the hard left liberal, they apparently do not bother themselves with consistency. It's not an important task, an important trait to have. Well, so where do you find yourself on the spectrum, honestly? I'd assume some type of libertarian, but I don't know that I've ever heard you be explicit about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely a libertarian. I mean, I took the test and I end up like 2/3 of the way down the libertarian line and about 1/3 of the way into the right spectrum. That's usually where I land, somewhere in there.
That's where most good people land. You're good.
Yeah, it is. But you were just talking about like being a lefty yourself or whatever. I just had Vermin Supreme on my show and we were talking about this.
He stood us up, sadly.
Yeah,
I wanted to talk to him about nuclear really bad after I heard him on the Sherry Voluntary show, and then like we set it up. In fairness, when we set it up was like back in March, and COVID hit like 2 weeks beforehand, so it probably wasn't the top of his things.
Busy times. But this is a booming podcast, man.
But I had him on, and we were talking about the idea of being left or right libertarian, and we came to the conclusion it really doesn't matter if you're left or right as long as you're libertarian first. You know, it's the idea of if you want to use force to make other people comply with your right or left tendencies, that's what's wrong. If you have your own idea of what you want society to be, but you're not going to force other people to live that way, that's what makes you a libertarian versus a right-winger or a leftist, I think. And I think that was pretty accurate.
I mean, if you're a commie that's going to respect those property lines that we agree on, then go
do your thing.
Socialize all you want. I don't care. That's fine by me.
Yeah.
I just don't anticipate that happening.
Right.
I also don't fear them.
You've seen it.
I don't fear them though either, because I mean, eventually they run out of food in the commune, and
yeah, 3 days is the maximum amount of time it takes.
I won't deign to suggest. I just know that historically that is how it has ended up. So, you know, what's funny is like even in the well financed communes, it kind of tends to end up that way.
Right.
So, now we when I initially talked to you, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do? Other than a Twitter personality, you have a podcast yourself, and I asked you if you'd be interested in kind of mixing it up with us, because I really want to grow our brand, and we need to get more people of our ilk out there fighting the good fight for nature, because I'm sorry, the left is going to destroy the planet trying to do what they want to do. I personally would like to keep nature here.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't, they'll kill humanity in the process, and that's also a pretty bad thing in my book. I like humanity. I'd like to see the little brown people overseas flourish, as opposed to, you know, be permanently kept from cheap energy that will allow them to have a society like ours. You know,
right?
Just horrible right-wing stuff like that.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have the Twitter page and the YouTube channel mostly because I'm trying to bring these ideas to people who aren't already libertarians. That's kind of what my shtick is, because I feel like libertarian Twitter and libertarian YouTube is an echo chamber of, you know, unregulated machine guns, recreational heroin. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, cool, but most people don't care about that. You know, they care about the skyrocketing prices of health insurance and housing, and you know, they care about climate change. They care about all these things that a lot of libertarians don't talk about. So I try to go to those third rail subjects that a lot of libertarians don't. And I've had, I think, like 7 or 8 libertarian candidates on my show so far, and I actually push them in those areas. I start asking them what they think about national parks.
Good luck trying to find a spot Spike's not comfortable in, just for the record.
Yeah, no, he's probably coming on my show. I've got in contact with his campaign manager, so I'm working on that.
I want to get Spike on after the election. Like, I want to talk to him,
there you go.
You know, mid-December, mid-November. That's when I want him.
Yeah.
You know, when he can be real.
Yeah. But that's what I do online. What I do for work, I'm actually a truck driver. I move heavy equipment around, and I've worked.
We
I've
guessed
had my
by the
CDL
mustache,
since I
for the
was
record.
18.
I assumed it was
Yeah,
either a truck
no,
driver or a cop. And a
yeah,
cop
no,
didn't seem
a
logical
cop.
given your politics.
Yeah, no. I actually almost went that way though. I was headed that way in high school, and then I bailed out luckily. But
And I almost
anyway,
went
I've
to
had
the
my
priesthood.
CDL. Oh man.
Now I advocate
Hey, no,
orphans.
you didn't. That is a lie. That is a lie. I'm calling it right now.
Oh, really?
It's a lie,
You want to
straight
call
up.
it? No, I was going into the priesthood at 17. That was my plan after high school.
But,
And then I got my first blowjob, and I thought that was a
Okay.
terrible
That was
plan
it.
after that point. But
all right.
prior to that, that was something I legitimately planned on doing. It was very Catholic.
Well, there's
yeah,
a question
anyway,
in there I'm not going to ask, but
It wasn't even that good of a
so
blowjob,
I've worked.
probably.
I heard Catholic, I heard BJ, and I'm like, well, I don't know. Anyway,
Are you assuming it was a priest?
I'm not assuming anything.
I was
I'm
never
not
an altar
assuming
boy.
anything.
Never an altar boy.
So Reed, what were you saying?
I got sidetracked there a little bit. I don't remember anymore.
Sorry, I'm real good at that.
No, it was. But I've worked in the transportation industry and the power delivery industry since I was 19, pretty much. I was doing line work for like 6 or 7 years and operating equipment, and so I had an inside look at how power was produced and how it was transmitted across the land, like all the infrastructure that goes into building substations and power plants and power lines. And so I've always cared about nature a lot because my dad always brought us backpacking a lot when we were kids. And so I always really cared about protecting it. And then when I was 21, I took a trip to all 50 states. I took like a year and a half off, lived out of my pickup truck, and I went up to Alaska, and that was when I first started realizing how serious climate change was, because you could see how the glaciers were really retreating at a rapid rate, and they had mileposts for each year. So they had 1800 was like half a mile away from the glacier or something, and then 1900 was only like 500 feet from 1800. And then every decade it sped up, and it got to the point where at by the time you were at the glacier, every year was like, I don't know, 40 feet or something, and it's just accelerating and accelerating. So that really woke me up to that path, because I'd never really thought about it much. Growing up in New Hampshire, we didn't see the effects of it too much. And it always bothered me, the war on science that the right had. But then I started to realize the left had its own war on science, and its war on science is through solutions. The right kind of denies the problem, and then the left has these ridiculous ideas about how we can fix the problems. And to me, at least the ones that I've heard them talk about, none of them are really rooted in possibility or the scientific method. So I want people who are sane to start caring about the environment, because I think they'll provide real solutions. And if they don't, then the socialists are going to have a monopoly on that voting block, and people who even realize that some of their solutions are ridiculous, they're still going to go with them because it's better than bring back coal in their minds.
Why would we go to coal when we have nuclear, frankly? But
that's a good question. But
that's that one thing.
Damn well why.
I think that's the craziest thing. Like, so, having read both of those books and stuff, they really get into Schellenberger's big thing is density. He's like, why in the world would you trade up an environmentally dense power source for a less dense power source? The fact of the matter is you can generate much more energy with nuclear and a much smaller footprint than you can with anything else. Then the next best thing is your fossil fuels, and then eventually you get when you start getting to like prehistoric levels of energy density, when you start talking about at the very least the current state of wind and solar, which is what they always want to go to. The fact of the matter is like they take up huge tracts of land, working at their best to come anywhere near. Like it's scientifically, it makes literally no sense. I'm actually interested because we don't get people of our ilk on to ask questions like this, and hopefully I'll get a sane answer. I'm not going to say I don't believe that global warming is happening, because I mean, obviously you can look out and see it is. Now the question is, why is that inherently bad? By what mechanism is that bad?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to say that up front. But from what I've seen and the research I've done, it seems the rate at which it's warming up is much faster than it ever has been, and it's commensurate with industrialization, right?
Okay. Now, plants and humans alike, in fact, most animals, really like warm weather. So why is that an inherently bad thing? These are the questions that I feel like people don't ever ask. When we're told that a warmer Earth is bad, we're just supposed to go, okay, they'll say, oh, well, we'll lose all of our land to the oceans when sea level rise. Well, that's not happening. The rate at which it would happen, we can make dikes and places like that. Like, oh wait, Holland that already lives under sea level. Like, there's plenty of ways to combat anything that would happen, and when you factor in that any solution they're going to give you is going to be very, very detrimental to poor people across the globe. When they talk carbon dioxide, you're like, well, plants love carbon dioxide, and that's part of why we're greening so fast. Like, we're almost to a point where we're not deforesting, we're reforesting at a rate almost exceeding it, because the level of CO2 and the increased temperature at the poles is the which is another thing that I've been hearing a lot of through the CO2 skeptical people. I've yet to hear anybody dispute it. I just say they're crazy. Is that, well, of course you're going to get much more of a rise in temperature, but if you pay attention to where that rise is, basically it's that the poles are the places where we're getting all the heat, and it's not like we're going to all of a sudden be 200 degrees at the equator. Basically, we're going to be much more like the United States at the poles, and maybe more like Florida, say, in maybe a little bit higher in the U.S. Things like that.
It could be. You don't want too much Florida.
I don't want any Florida personally. I'll move up to fucking the Arctic if I have to personally. I mean, because even like when you're telling me, you can see like the acceleration of the glaciers melting, and I'm kind of like, well, yeah, if the ice cube always melts more at the end because it's got less internal, more kinetic energy outside than inside, and surface area is going to change by the smaller it gets. So it's like invariably that would happen just based on simple scientific principles in my eyes. I'm not asking you, by the way, to be an expert on this. It was just the thing is, I get so frustrated when we're not allowed to talk about, like, okay, you say that it's going to end the world. Well, by what standard? What world is going to end? Like, most shit that lives likes it to be warmer than cold. Cold is the thing that's killed more people than anything throughout history.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, you said the thing about the ice, but I meant not necessarily just the ice. The temperature has risen more rapidly than it ever has before. So not just the ice melting, but the sea level, the temperature of the ocean, the temperature of the air worldwide. We've had the hottest years we've ever had on record, most of them right in a row the last decade or so.
Where?
So it is not just the ice melt. What's that?
I said where?
Worldwide, like the worldwide average temperature.
And by how much?
I think by like I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but it's by. It doesn't sound like a lot because it's like parts of a degree, but it's a pretty substantial amount, even though it doesn't sound like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say is people saying we're saving the planet, because the planet is going to evolve. Even if all
it's going to be here, whatever.
Die, all animals die, everything. Yeah, the planet's going to be fine. So the reason we should care, if we care, is for us, right? And for our, how we live on the earth, how we interact with the earth. So things in the Arctic will change a lot if, the ice caps melt, if the permafrost goes away, and then obviously low spots of land, like you were saying, we could build dikes or whatever, but you will have a lot of low land that, like Venice and Florida, places like that, it will heavily affect them. The fish in the oceans aren't really doing too well with a lot of the warming. Like you said, there's a lot of greening going on, and that might sound like a good thing, but around South America, there's a lot of algae growing.
I was going to say the algae blooms are something I do care about.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things that. Go ahead.
Well, no. So here's a question I ask about this, because this is actually one of my soapboxes that I get on. Is that not that I'm not even going to sit here and tell you that the I don't think the global warming is an issue. It's certainly something at the very least we need to pay attention to, just because why wouldn't you? The thing, like my big thing is I'm far more concerned about all that fucking all of that farm runoff from the Mississippi Delta that eventually becomes a bunch of fertilizers out in our ocean. Like, I imagine that probably can't be doing great things for algae blooms the world over, dumping, I don't know, 100 years of, whatever you call it, 100 years of fertilizer into the ocean. Like a regenerative agriculture is definitely something like it would be higher on my priority list to see if people have it. Like, I would much rather see people get rid of all their yards than, frankly, worry about polar bears, because I think it'd do a hell of a lot more for the planet. But
yeah, I think it's fair to say that people have made climate change the only issue, and they're willing to, have a Green New Deal that would require ridiculous amounts of mining and deforestation, and all these stupid things. They're willing to break all these eggs for this omelet that they don't really need necessarily, and then they're not going to have any eggs left.
Well, the joke is
kind of what you're saying.
And the joke is, and like if you were to do everything, literally everything in the Green New Deal, which by the way, would completely destroy the planet, it's economically. It's also going to do nothing from an environmental standpoint, because what it would actually
if you destroy
happen,
humanity, the environment will,
I guess that's true. If humanity's no longer here, after us, it'll start working. In the meantime, it will actually do nothing to curb the amount of CO2 that goes into the air. It doesn't change shit. Like, warming will still happen.
See, my thing is, like, when you look at, like, the global warming, when you look at all these things that we pin on climate change, and I feel like this is just the same thing with all science that we look at today, and we're like, oh, this is the problem. Like, we don't know the problem necessarily. Like, we pin it on this thing because it's something that we can pin it on. But how many other things are there that humanity is doing that are just like, the runoff? All the fertilizer you dump on your cow pastures down in Chile that run off into the sea, right? How many other things are there that we're doing that we're not aware of that have those little tiny effects that all add up to something else? And we pin it on this other thing that we see because it's what we latched onto. It's what the science tells us works. And we all know our science is not exactly infallible.
What's wrong with you? No, I'm just kidding.
We've been doing this a year together. I couldn't tell you what's wrong with him. Something.
I don't know.
Don't
My
you
wife
guys know that science is absolute truth, and if you disagree with it, then you're a fascist pig who hates women. I don't know if you know that, but
I don't believe in, like, anyway.
You didn't listen to our episode, like, what will it take for people to believe science again?
Yeah.
Well, we're seeing it. I think we've seen the perfect exemplification of that with COVID-19. The idea that science is absolute truth. You know, I mean, it's changed as it's gone on. They've found out different things. But there were people who were just latching on to the first thing we heard. This is the gold standard and you can't touch it. And then it changed suddenly. Oh, no, okay, this is absolute. You know, it's like, all right, maybe you don't really know what's absolute about this. And maybe you should think about that with when you think about science in general.
I just look at the numbers.
No, 100%.
I don't even need the science when I've got the math.
Here's the real question. How do you convince people that that's the case, right? That like, here's this whole COVID-19 thing. Here's all the numbers. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. How do you convince people of that? Because like, you know, when you spell it out, when you paint it on the wall and people just don't get it, how do you get them to
that's the problem.
Understand, you know?
I mean, in regards to that, people have been right since the beginning and they've been told to shut up. They're wrong. And the further things go on, the more right they get.
They're not like, you know, government scientists, or maybe they are and they just got like, you know, way laid out. I don't know. But I don't know. The COVID-19 has seriously disturbed me.
The coup.
When you look through history, the scientists who were making headway were not the institutionalist scientists. The institutionalist scientists always hated them, right? Like a lot of them worked with the church and they hated, you know, any ideas about like Galileo had or Copernicus had.
And let's point out,
got killed for it, man.
Let's point out the atheists sticking up for the church scientists, folks.
Well, hey, I respect Christians who are not cultists, you know, who have their own independent thoughts. So.
Oh man, J.W. Weatherman was going. He goes hard on that like anti-atheist thing, and I'm like, I think too many Antifa members claiming to be atheists when they have a religion. It's just not, you know.
I think atheism has become a religion in the sense of, in the same way that like, you know, sort of, you know, Islam and the infidels and
well, listen here, Christian, you're outnumbered
like,
today.
You know, I'm whatever, man.
Well, let me define atheism. Atheism, I mean it like the original term. I mean, because there has become like this anti-religion.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
When it becomes a religion in and of itself, like you're doing the same thing that like you were mad at people for, you know, like it's the same thing, you know.
I forever like just look down on any atheist that is just as dogmatic and you know, as much a charlatan as half the Christians I know. You know, but I will say technically I do follow the atheist as being an anti-theist. Like I really think that it is an archaic way of thinking that hopefully the entirety of humanity will move past at some point. But in the meantime, if it helps you find value first. You gotta get past global warming first, right? So what are, I know I asked you a little bit of this when I was talking to you, but what are the things that really get you fired up personally? You know, you mentioned your trip up to Alaska. I mean, I'm sorry, seeing any of that, like that beautiful state up there. I had a bunch of friends that did
Vermonters. I'm going to say it's Vermonters.
You want to blame everything on Vermonters.
No. Like we're both, Nicky and I are both from like upstate New York, you know, Western New York, or like the sticks in New York. And like I lived in Vermont for a few years, and like I hate what is going on in New England. I hate it because New England is beautiful, man. And like they just have destroyed it. It's just been destroyed and turned into this like, hey, let's compete with California. Like,
you mean let's
stupidity.
Let's cut the top of a mountain off for fucking wind power that we're never going to make because it doesn't work.
I could tell you a story that like, yeah, we'll get into it one day about like solar farms in Vermont. But yeah,
dude, I'm just thinking back to like some of those scenes that you watched in Planet of the Humans, and it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
How can anyone defend this shit? Just
what you don't think about it. People don't think. There's no thinking involved anymore. It's what am I told?
Well,
there's no thinking.
It's because a lot of shit's in remote places, and people don't go to remote places. They just like to see the pretty pictures of them.
They visit. They
Some
vacation to
people
remote
do.
places.
And I think that some people are the ones that are starting to change their minds and why we have the Schellenbergers and why you're
Could be.
getting, the Planet of the Humans. And it's because I think those people are really thinking, oh shit, we've been backing the wrong horse on this.
Don't back a horse. It's your first problem.
Yeah.
So what are your issues, Reed?
Yeah. So you mean environmentally? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
like you asked? Yeah.
We'll keep it on format here.
Yeah. Yeah, because that could be a long conversation. Yeah. So
It's like I don't like women or blacks, children.
Oh boy.
Oh man. I'm sorry.
But working in the power delivery industry, I saw the stupidity of more regulations that don't necessarily do anything to save the environment. So the first really big example is, working in the swamps. We used to just have to place these wooden mats out in the swamps so that our machines wouldn't sink into the peat. So it would just be like a platform we could work off of. But then the definition of wetland kept getting expanded more and more and more. So suddenly we were putting mats on dry ground, for literally miles sometimes. Like there was one job, it's probably like, I don't know, 5 miles of mats just laid out. Sometimes we'd have to rent them and we'd just get tractor trailer load after tractor trailer load coming in. And so what you have now is you have to pay for all that extra work, first of all, but then you're also trucking all these loads of mats in, and then you have to have a machine that lays all of them out, and I think they're 16 feet long, so 16 feet wide, and then they're 4 feet by 16 feet, and they just get laid down in the swamp. So they sit there for a few weeks, they kill everything
underneath it, right?
And then so they don't really stop from tearing up the ground, because a lot of the times when you're going out, you can't be on one side of the mat all the time, so you have to drive over it anyway. So it's
I was going to say,
this
you're pulling tractor
wasted
trailers out just to dump those things out there, then you're doing some damage.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So you've just burned a ton of fuel, and you've just killed a ton of plants. And
Stop saying that.
Back in the old days, we'd just drive in and drive out. And if it's in a swamp in New Hampshire, usually after a few months, you can't even tell we were there anymore, and it kind of fixes itself. So that was my first run-in with the government trying to save the environment, and realizing that most of the time it does the opposite. We had this, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Northern Pass. It was this power line project that was supposed to happen in New Hampshire. But up in Quebec, they have these hydro dams that run like 500% the amount of power that Quebec needs. So we'd cut a deal with Hydro-Quebec that we'd run high voltage lines up there. We could power all of New Hampshire, I think all of Mass and Connecticut, and then even like some places in New York maybe. And these dams already exist. They're already producing power. And a bunch of environmentalists shot it down because we'd have to cut down 8 miles of trees. Instead, they want to put solar fields and, wind farms, but we don't even have all that.
How many square feet of space are they going to cut down for those?
Yeah, no shit. But we don't even have that infrastructure.
No cussing on the show.
We went back to burning coal again, because we had this big coal plant we had shut down in preparation for running these lines, and then Northern Pass got cut out, so we just started burning coal again. And you'd burn like a 3-acre pile of coal every couple days, and you'd have a train trucking it, bringing it in. And our wood chip plant started firing back up again. And so there you go, environmentalists, you just saved the planet. So I just witnessing all of this made me realize that I got to say the left, because those were mostly left-wing movements in New Hampshire pushing all that stuff. they're their own worst enemy a lot of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
it honestly made me wonder if they really care about the environment or if they're just using it as a catalyst to gain more government control, because I think there are a lot of left-leaning people who do care about the environment, but I also think there are people who just want to use it as an opportunity to grab more control.
Lots of useful idiots out there, bro.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that's what really irks me is when there's a political stunt, which, like you guys were mentioning wind power, I look at that as a huge political stunt that doesn't do anything to help, but people just gobble it up. And if you say that, you're like Copernicus, people, you're like, oh, how dare you, that's heresy, how dare you question the science. It's like, well, you can actually do your own research and look at the numbers. And, that used to be what science was, but I guess it's not anymore. So
look, science is a process, not a thing to be listened to.
Right.
I love a freaking wetland, man. They wetlands are like the bane of the world's existence.
Well, politically speaking.
Yes, yeah. Like what are they? And it changes every year. And you know what? If there's like a puddle on there in June, it's gonna be a wetland. Depends on what state you live in, But it's absurd, and like you're not the first person to say that. Like I've experienced it, not to that degree, but like it's wild, it's crazy, and like, I remember I did an internship in high school with the soil and water department in my county. We would go out and like walk through people's like cow fields and mark like where this seasonal stream was, and that like would become a wetland. And it's just, at the time it was cool, and now I look back and I'm like thinking like what happened to that dude's field, like what happened to all of that, and it's crazy, man. It's
well,
crazy.
he's not going to get to decide what happens on it for the rest of time. That's what we know for sure.
Right. And it's crazy unless he can pay for somebody to buy it,
I mean, we know the property rights
build a
are
wetland
fiction.
somewhere else,
Yeah, so I think there should be some basic regulations, but they should be extremely simple and plain. Like you should not be allowed to dump coal sludge in a river, but a river should be clearly defined. That's the problem with all these rules, is the definitions just get expanded into ridiculous measures. So a river is, like you said, a parking lot with a puddle in it. And,
yeah, for real.
So I don't know. I mean, it's a slippery slope, because once you give them, give them that power to regulate something, then they always abuse it. So it's hard knowing where that line is.
I would argue we can't have regulation for the exact thing that you just said. And said, well, throughout history, and this is all of history, they've shown that we can't do that, because if you give them the regulations, well, then they're going to interpret them, and then they're going to know where the bar is set. So someone's going to lobby to make sure they're just under the bar, so they can break the rules, break the spirit of the arrangement, but you lose your recourse. We can't sue them because, well, we're within our legal rights to do this.
Right.
At the end of the day, like, as I tell a friend, it's like, I think that the likelihood of the government stopping anyone from doing anything is a lot less likely than me just owning the land and never letting them start doing something.
Depends. It depends how mad you've made the government.
Yeah.
If you've really pissed on their boot, like they'll make sure you don't do anything.
Well, yeah, but that's not how it works, because business isn't pissing on their boot. They're paying the boots. They're buying them nicer boots. We're the ones pissing on their boots by trying to tell them no.
Exactly.
And by not giving them their stipend.
Mm-hmm.
Continue, Reed. What was your question there?
Well, my problem is, I really agree with that sentiment, but and maybe you guys know a lot more about this than I do, but it seems like since the Environmental Protection Agency has been instated, that things have gotten drastically better from before it existed.
They really go to great pains to make you think that, don't they? Honestly, you look at the Clean Water Act, you look at the Clean Air Act, they jumped in front of something that was already happening, because guess what? People don't want their fucking skies black, and they don't want their water to be, toxic. In fact, if you actually look at the history of what both of those things were doing prior to those things being added, they actually slowed the trajectory down. Like it was actually increasing at a better rate prior to those things being created. And then, lo and behold, government steps in, takes credit for what's been already happening, and then it then allows for the carve-outs.
And that's it. I think it's the carve-outs. It's the licensing. It's the, okay, GE, you can go dump this in the Hudson River. Like, whereas before,
well, we were talking
people
earlier.
figured it out, and you didn't want that stuff in there, but now they're protected.
We covered
now
that.
GE is protected.
We covered that one article where basically they're allowing them to dump salt water from fracking into like actual habitats, just because we like the money, so we're just going to allow this. Things like that they just sign off on because it's economically advantageous. Now, don't get me wrong, maybe people would make that decision, but maybe they wouldn't. Well, we don't have a choice to stand in the way. Where the left doesn't get to lobby against that. One of the other things that that I always bring up in this regard is, you want to look at what the EPA is really good at. Go and look up at Superfund sites, and then think to yourself, what private entity would allow property to go to waste like that? They'd go in immediately and fix it up so they can do something with it and sell it. Instead, some of those places have been there 50 years. Nothing's ever happened to it. It gets the problem, magnifies, leaches out into other areas, and they won't let anyone else touch the property to do anything with it because, we got to protect it.
I remember when I was a kid growing up, there was a gas station, and I think it was in New York, and I think at some point they passed some new laws about old gas tanks in the ground, and people had to pull them up, and like old convenience store type things, and it basically put this one place out of business, and they just deteriorated. They went out of business, and the lot was left there. It was a corner lot. Nobody wanted it because all the cleanup was there. Eventually, I don't know, 10 years later, maybe somebody bought it and they cleaned it up, and it became this little part of town that, now it's this really nice new house. And, that's sort of the way I think it kind of works, and it can work, and it will work, like somebody's going to want that.
It just needed the developer
eventually.
With enough money that he could.
Exactly. Right. You just need somebody that will actually come in and say, I'm going to clean. Now, if those laws weren't there that said you had to clean this tank out, and that company, that little convenient store still went out of business, like, who knows? Maybe somebody else would have come and picked it up, and the cleanup might not have been the same. You might not have scrubbed out those underground tanks.
Because what I imagine probably happened was that developer went in there, and that nice neighborhood you're talking about that was put there was probably part of a big development that someone paid a lot of money to get that waived. Mm-hmm. Hey, don't bother us about this. We're going to bring more taxpayers into your district, as opposed to that one business owner.
Yeah, it could have been. It's shady. It's shady any way you cut it. And
I mean, that's a narrative.
I just don't trust any of it.
That's a story I'm telling. It seems just as fucking plausible as what they try and tell you is the thing. Mm-hmm. So, well, we're right up on time here. Reed, anything else you want to get out while you're here?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone who listens to this wants to follow me on Twitter or YouTube, it's pretty easy to find me. I'm the only naturalist capitalist out there. It's not a very
I'm changing my Twitter tonight. Just because that I'm changing my Twitter.
It's going to be a real naturalist capitalist.
The real naturalist capitalist.
And it's going to be a picture of his balls.
But yeah,
if you know any socialists, we should send them your way too, right? You can't find any socialists that'll come on your show.
It's just going to be a smidgen. If you want the whole picture, you got to pay me for it.
His OnlyFans, you can find it. Yes, the real naturalist capitalist.
I will get it.
I just wanted to clarify. I might have sounded a little bit like I don't know, that I didn't think the markets were the best way for green energy or renewable energy that's actually good, or nuclear energy expanding or whatever. But I do think that the market is the best way forward. I think the government might have a very limited role in protecting certain lands. But the problem is they always abuse whatever power you give them. So you got to be really careful about what
No
you
need
let
to
them
apologize, man.
regulate. So
You
yeah.
just happened to end up on a podcast with a bunch of anarchists. We realize we're
Yeah.
way off the reservation here. I'm
Yeah.
actually, I'd like to get more people like you that are probably sane, because we can talk to other anarchists. We
That
really need
was
to reach the halfway there, people.
Well, no, I mean, I'm usually the anarchist, like, one in the group, so it's nice being weird being the most statist person on the show. So.
You want to hear the crazy? You should go back and listen to us talking about Elizabeth Warren's Blue New Deal. That's some comedy gold there.
I will say, I think the two hangups with anarchism, not necessarily hangups, things that it took some time to process through, and I think the environment was one of them, and the other that I'm always wrangling in my brain is like child welfare and how you work that. Not that the government does a good job at that anyway, but what kind of system would actually be useful for that?
Kids,
if anybody knows, please email me, and let's have that conversation. Exactly.
And the police will stop you from showing up on somebody else's property with an AK-47 and taking the kid if you think it's been done bad. I see that working out differently in an.
Well, I know, and there's, and those are the things though, right? Like, and for me that was it, and talking through a lot of environmentalism type stuff.
Look, Ben, I just told you that the government is protecting people that are hurting their kids. That's all you need to know.
What are you gonna do? Government hurts kids if they take them anyway. Right? Yeah, well, hey, let the government take your kids and see how hurt they get.
Ben is a foster parent, so he's seen a lot of stuff. He knows that system a little too well.
Anyway,
just airing out all the laundry there, Ben.
I need to do some laundry. I think I've worn this shirt for a week straight now.
That shirt looks like surprisingly like. It looks like it's either really way too warm or incredibly breathing.
Oh, it's super lightweight. If you could see right now, like, I mean, this shirt is sheer. Like I can't wear it to church because it like turns all the ladies.
He's like, I'm just cutting glass, just fucking.
Yeah, it's just not happening. No, it's like my work shirt. It blocks the sun because down here in Georgia, like your skin will melt, and
I'm telling you, Ben, that is not blocking the sun.
It's probably not, but I feel better about it, so leave me alone, huh?
Okay. So, all right, folks. Well, that has been another episode of Free Market's Green Earth, episode number 56 to be precise. We'd like to thank Reed Coverdale, the Naturalist Capitalist, for coming on. And if you want to read about the interview or learn more about Reed, you can head over to freemarketsgreenearth.com and you can find that out. So.
What's your not yet, because he told us what he does, but he did not tell us where to go.
We said a Naturalist Capitalist on YouTube, bro. Where were you?
I guess.
I'll say it again for anyone who missed. Yeah, the Naturalist Capitalist on YouTube, and then on Twitter, it's my username is the Naturalist Capitalist, but it's at Reed Coverdale. So.
I forgot YouTube was like a big pain in the backside about that. Never mind.
I've really been trying to hammer home his actual handle.
What kind of professional are you? You don't have a website, man.
I'm gonna go buy it.
Go to like GeoCities and get something set up on like Angel Fire or something.
Fuck that. Just go to Namecheap, buy fucking naturalistcapitalist.com and direct it to your YouTube page. Whatever. Job done.
It is I think it's an original name. I can't find it anywhere else for anything. So
well, you're gonna have to pay me for it after this because I'm gonna go and buy it. So maybe if you can be faster on Google than I am.
Yeah.
Anyways,
well, what does an anarchist think about copyright laws and all that?
Oh, I hate all of it.
If you want to pay me for it, it's yours.
But I mean, registering something, that's not copyright. That is simply just registering a use of something. You can't have both of us having the site because then it wouldn't work.
Right.
So that's it's a functional thing. So, okay. All right, folks. You all have a good one. Thanks for hanging out.
Shit.